Hey, everybody, welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. Please take a second to share it, to click subscribe if you haven't, to click thumbs up, all of those good things. Let's see. I'll get the rock fin going here in a second. And you can watch at youtube.com/moment of clarity or rockfin.com/Lee Camp. Today, awesome show. I have Danny Haiphong for you. He does amazing work, great journalist. I love his stuff. I love his book. So I'm going to be talking to him, and part of the reason is because of I've been covering the propaganda about China, and I felt like we needed a deeper dive. There was some debating going on in the comment section, and so I thought, let's get somebody here who knows more than me. So I'll be talking to him in just a minute. I wanted to let you know all of the super chat donations will go to people in need. We're trying something new where you can actually just apply to possibly receive some of those donations. We'll make more of that clear this Sunday in the live stream with Eleanor Goldfield. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern at YouTube and Rockfin. And if you are someone who's struggling, where $50 or $100 might make a big difference in your bills or what's going on in your life, just email commoncensored@protonmail.com. You can also donate to Venmo at Lee Camp. Just send it there, but put donation in the comment section. And we will explain all the other details this Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And hopefully we can make it a continuing thing where we're, a community here and we're all helping each other out and we're helping each other get through these incredibly tough times as so many people are struggling. So many people are facing eviction and so many other hardships. But for this episode, we're focusing on China because I don't know if you knew this. We're in a new Cold War. Yay! We always love a new Cold War, right? This time, not just against Russia, but also against China. And so we've been seeing all this garbage propaganda against them. Just about every headline you see that's about China is anti-China. And the story that I covered, the specific story I covered the other day, was the definition of genocide and how Mike Pompeo, then followed by the Biden administration and Tony Blinken and many others, have decided that China is committing genocide against the Uyghurs in China. And this comes from one report by a man named Adrian Zenz, who, as I went in deep detail on from the Gray Zone article, Adrian Zenz is a anti-Semitic, far right-wing evangelical German Christian who believes Jews will burn in a fiery furnace. And he also makes up his numbers and just changes things to fit whatever version of reality he's trying to push. And that is the entirety of where they're getting this idea that China has committed genocide against the Uyghurs. But there's a lot more detail than just that. And there's a great article on the Gray Zone right now by Danny Haiphong, who looked into Democracy Now!, which many of you know Democracy Now! For many years, they were kind of the gold star of left-wing kind of grassroots media. They were left of corporate media. They would often call out corporate media. They would have on people like Julian Assange and really tear apart the propaganda that we were getting from our garbage mainstream media. And yet now, on many different topics, on Russia, on Syria, on China, they seem to be just parroting whatever the State Department tells them to say, or not tells them to say, but whatever the State Department's saying, or what we see at Reuters or MSNBC or any of these other kind of anti-China, anti-Russia propaganda sites. And so it's a sad time to see that happening in Democracy Now! And I thought we should get to the bottom of that. And Danny wrote an incredible article detailing just how far it seems Democracy Now! Has fallen. But yeah, I want to get into the details. So without further ado, by the way, you should definitely grab his book. It's called American Exceptionalism and American Innocence. You should also check out his podcast, which he co-hosts with Margaret Kimberly called Left Lens. He writes for Black Agenda Report, and this latest one was for the Gray Zone. Here is Danny Haiphong.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you? How are things going on your end?
You surviving these bizarre times?
Yeah, surviving.
Where are
As
you?
best
New
we can.
York?
Yeah, I'm in New York. I was around a year ago. I was at your book launch at the Strand, I think it was, and we had that strange
Right.
fellow who walked out of your launch right as it began.
That was the last event with people at it that I think ever took place in New York, or for me, or anybody really.
Right. Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was
Good
a
to
good
be here.
time with Ben Norton was there as well. But so yeah, let's get into this excellent article for the Gray Zone. Thank you for taking the time to look up all of the propaganda that Democracy Now has been publishing. I guess to start with, so like I was saying to the viewers, I got deep into the ridiculousness of genocide and went into also the Gray Zone's coverage of Adrian Zenz and the hilarious numbers he's pulling out of his ass and everything else. But a lot of people were commenting, well, okay, maybe it's not genocide, but it is all these other things. And the Democracy Now headlines say things like mass rape, sweeping surveillance, forced labor, child separation, prison camps. And so I was wondering if you could go through some of those stories and explain what is the reality.
Sure. Well, it's been, I would say, at least the last 2 years that Xinjiang province, the Uyghur Autonomous Region, has made headlines in the United States almost regularly. And of course, as you mentioned, Adrian Zenz happens to be the preeminent scholar that the US media, the UK media, the entire Western press has cited over and over and over again as the expert. And we know about his credibility issues. But I think what is always missing, and why I wanted to write about Democracy Now, is that there is a context that is constantly suppressed because there are geopolitical ambitions that the United States and its allies are fomenting with China, in that there is a new Cold War, as you said at the beginning of the stream. And the issue of Xinjiang, the issue of the Uyghur ethnic minority in China, is being used as a proxy to ramp up aggression in that region. The primary reason for this that no one talks about is the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative has been a project talked about for many years now in China, and it has become a huge project with over 120 countries signing on, trillions of dollars worth of agreements invested all over the global south. And Xinjiang province is really the site of where the Belt and Road Initiative is moving through in order to connect to the rest of the Middle East and then into Europe. So this region is very important. And China itself has focused a lot on this region because Western China, especially northwestern China, has been one of the poorest regions in the country. And so as the Gray Zone, Gareth Porter and Max Blumenthal pointed out, that there have been real gains made that have been twisted and turned, whether it's around things like family planning, around things like poverty alleviation, that have been twisted and turned as examples of some kind of oppression, when in fact, what China has responded to in that region is both the extreme economic poverty that existed there for many, many, many decades, and the fact that it borders many key places, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, places that have harbored real extremism that has run chaos in that region, especially from the 16 years between 1990 and 2016, where there were thousands of attacks along the border in remote areas that led to hundreds upon hundreds of deaths of civilians. And there was a counterterrorism response. But that response, unlike the response of the United States in 2001, waging endless wars abroad, as well as ramping up the surveillance state at home, the response was largely about how do we ensure that people are not attracted to this kind of ideology. And a lot of it has been centered around education, employment. And while there definitely are quote unquote camps, whatever you want to call them, education centers, employment centers, they serve more of the basis of preventing these kind of attacks from happening. They've been successful, which is part of the reason they're always in the news now, is that there haven't been these attacks. There isn't this chaos that Reuters, et cetera, can talk about anymore. So now they are actually making them up out of whole cloth using very dubious sources, not just Adrian Zenz, but even someone like Abdueli Ayoup, who was a Ford Foundation fellow, ends up going to Urumqi, where I've been, into Xinjiang, tried to open a school with monies that, it's not like you can travel somewhere from the United States or the West to China and say, I'm going to open a school now with money I made. That's not necessarily something that you can just do in most parts of the world. And he ended up connecting to Radio Free Asia about his case. He made himself part of the Uyghur Human Rights Project, another national endowment for democracy organization. To Cerne Ziawuddin, who received a 10-year passport in 2019 from China, ends up coming to the United States, being settled by the Uyghur Human Rights Project, and claiming now, after years of saying that the worst that was done to her was that she was detained for no reason, now is claiming that there's massive rapes in the camps just 1 year after she said that didn't happen at all. It was just a little difficult. And so democracy
she's one of the
yeah,
main sources, right? I mean, she gets quoted a lot.
She is the source. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
She's like the source for all this. Oh, it's like systemic rape and everything. And yet she had told a very different story for a long time.
Yes, exactly. For several, she was involved with an organization, the Atatürk Human Rights Organization, we should just hold it with the utmost skepticism, given it has no website, no ability to check funding sources. But when you look at its now defunct Twitter account, you can see that all of its leaders were retweeting the U.S. Department of State, tweets, really pleading and begging for the United States to intervene directly in the Uyghur Autonomous Region in order to free the Uyghurs. And this is the organization where she stems out of, and she ends up now being resettled in the United States with a prominent World Uyghur Congress arm of that organization called the Uyghur Human Rights Project, and is seen as a key, as the organization said, a key link in future anti-atrocity cases. But all of these sources, what it really amounts to is the fact that, first of all, Xinjiang province, we have to be really honest, it's not hard to get there. Journalists can go, activists can go, people, anyone, it's a tourist, you can go and you can check out what's going on, you can talk to people, but that's never really done. What ends up happening is that all we get are very dubious sources linked to U.S. intelligence, linked to the U.S. Department of State. And so we can't get the context of what is happening there, which really, I think, speaks to more of the U.S.'s geopolitical ambitions against China and its interests in fomenting this new Cold War, more than it speaks to some kind of human rights atrocities, which, to be frank, the US, the UK too, has absolutely no ground to stand on when it comes to how it treats ethnic minorities, whether in the United States or around the world. In Democracy Now!, in 2019, I spoke about how she hosted Adrian Zenz and Rashan Abbas. And Rashan Abbas is another World Uyghur Congress linked so-called activist who worked for the Department of State and worked at Guantanamo Bay as Uyghurs were being tortured there as a translator, she claims now. But it's quite clear that she was actually working for military contractors in Guantanamo Bay Detention Center.
Wow. So like when you go back and read some of these Democracy Now! Articles or watch their segments, what are some of the most terrible things that they're saying or just accepting without pressing back, for proof, for evidence?
Yes, as I was doing the content analysis, I mean, the biggest to me issue is that Democracy Now! For an entire year, as the US was ramping up this new Cold War, sending warships to the South China Sea, banning Chinese technology apps, spreading this innuendo about Xinjiang, supporting so-called pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, and overall creating this very hostile and dangerous conflict with China. They were merely just repeating headlines. I mean, the February story that I covered, February 4th, 2021, was the only story in the last year that they did on China, despite this new Cold War that's been precipitating and that the United States has been facilitating. The headlines themselves, I mean, they are really just regurgitation of BBC, of New York Times, and oftentimes they just relied upon Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, when he was in the Trump administration, to basically get information about China. And even and I said, and there have been some people who have been trying to take me to task on this, that of course Democracy Now! Is going to paint China in a negative light if they're doing things wrong, because it's Democracy Now! And most of their stories are negative in character. But even neutral stories, so-called stories that could be seen as neutral, 100% of them were all about the COVID-19 pandemic. Even those were painted in a very skeptical tone, where, let's say in April 2020, when China was dealing with a possible second outbreak, it was contained right away and it didn't spread far. But in Wuhan, there was a second emergence of the virus, and Chinese officials were saying it was imported. Well, Democracy Now! Put quotes on imported, while when they were reporting on Taiwan's COVID-19 successes, it was, that how did they contain the pandemic? Everything, how can we learn from their success around this? And I
Right.
think that just shows the bias, even as they're supposedly just reporting on new developments around COVID-19, they're painting it with a very clear anti-China tone, and just continuing what the State Department, what John Bolton, what Mike Pompeo, and what the Trump administration was doing, even as the 99% of their other stories about the Trump administration are all about how the Trump administration is doing wrong in some respect, whether it was COVID-19, economy, foreign policy, etc.
Right. Yeah. The Trump administration is doing absolutely everything wrong. They're horrible. They're fascist, except on all of our foreign policy. We're going to agree with them 100%. And any crazy nutbag shit like China's committing genocide, we're going to go along with them and celebrate it. And yeah, it's amazing. And you touched on this a little bit, how this type of propaganda is used to kind of lay a foundation for fostering, sometimes trying to create a coup in a region, sometimes actively bombing, like we saw in Libya, Syria, Venezuela, that not actively bombing, but they kind of lay that human rights propaganda foundation to try and upend Venezuela, to put economic war against them, which has killed tens of thousands. And so really this is kind of this standard operating procedure of lay a basis of human rights accusations against a country, and then economic war is usually the next step.
Yeah, and it totally hinders our capacity to understand what's going on internationally and to connect it to the politics going on in the United States. I wrote about how Democracy Now! They will focus and debate about issues like Sanders. Is it socialism, right? But when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, there's only one line, and that's the line of the establishment. And this goes back, as I said in the article, to how they covered Libya and how they covered Syria in 2011. Those were key interventions that they got horribly wrong, and ultimately ended up supporting a brutal U.S. led overthrow of Libya, which created a regional catastrophe that is still being felt today and is one of the worst in human history. But now we're going to China, right? Where now there's a shift to China because China is a growing economic power, It is a competitor, and it has the capacity to potentially displace the United States as the world hegemon and do it in a different way. And that, I think, people need, especially people in the United States, because there's so many who are, as we saw over the last year, anti-China sentiment has raised, 100-fold, it seems, right? It went from
Yeah.
China was this inconvenient ally, right? Somebody who was
And all our stuff's made there. We got
yeah, right, a country that
every tag of everything we have says China on it. So
right. Beginning with the Obama administration, it was like, okay, we need to be a little more aggressive because China's becoming more powerful, but we're not going to be so upfront about it. Now, the United States has taken a very upfront position about its hostility towards China, and has used the media and has used these sources, these dubious sources, really, just cutouts of the intelligence apparatus, in order to create a common sense around this new Cold War. And what that does is it means that we can't understand things like, for example, I say, why doesn't Democracy Now! Cover poverty alleviation, which was celebrated across the country today in China? Why haven't they covered that? That seems to be a very odd thing, not to even mention in a report when it was one of the biggest global phenomenon that occurred this year. Why haven't they covered the new Cold War as a whole? Why haven't they made a story about the 400 military bases that surround China, almost like a noose, in the Pacific, in the Asia Pacific? None of that is covered by Democracy Now! And I think it's because there is this consensus among the entire establishment that this is an issue that is going to be played out and allowed to develop as the establishment, sees fit.
yeah, I love when they try and do the freak out that China, has, I think, 1 or 2 bases outside of China, while the U.S. has 900 or more. When China established that base outside of China, we were like, they're trying to take over the world. Like, the mainstream media lost their minds, and we're like, yeah, we only have 900 around the world. I mean, and then you look at military expenditure also is just, ours is crazy. We have the same expenditure as like the 150 other countries combined. It's just nuts, and yet China is shown to be like somehow belligerent.
Yeah, and it's not about whataboutism, because that's what a lot of people say is, oh, you're bringing up this because you're bringing up all the things about the United States and you're apologizing for China. That's not the point here. It's the point is that most people in the United States don't understand China. Most people in the West don't understand China. And it's only taken a year for people not only to not understand China, but to be bombarded with, frankly, racist caricatures of a country that is rising, and rising in a way that, of course, people in the United States are not going to get it, because, first of all, the United States hasn't seen economic growth in a long time, at least 15, 13, 14, 15 years. China's been growing steadily over the course of the last 10, 13, 15 years. The United States, people in the United States don't really know what it's like to live in conditions of extreme poverty, but people in the United States certainly know what it's like to live in poverty, and China's focused on it, but the United States isn't. The United States treats the world as its playground, as as a new market, or as a territory that needs to be dominated in order to secure the wealth and the profits of the few. China doesn't treat countries like that, and that's pretty obvious when you see how China relates to countries like Latin America, for example, Bolivia or Venezuela, how China and Russia have become closer over the years, and how you can ask even the most corrupt foreign powers, foreign countries around the world that the US props up, they'll say a completely different narrative about China than what most people in the United States understand about it, right? They'll talk about how China will offer them loans at much lower interest than the International Monetary Fund. And that allows them to have options to be able to, let's say in Ethiopia, which 60% of Ethiopia's budget is foreign aid. But the Ethiopian government can say, okay, I can build roads, I can build schools, I can build infrastructure because China's offering certain loans that foreign aid from the IMF or USAID is not really providing without extreme conditions on them. So I think part of this misunderstanding about China is that there is now that China is no longer just the factory of the world. That's no longer the case, right? It used to be China is just this low wage, country that the U.S. is exploiting. Well, China, was able to use what it learned and gained from very difficult years over the last 40 years to build up a modern and growing society that focuses on poverty alleviation, while the United States is going the complete opposite direction. And I think we cannot start to talk about what that means unless we get past and really debunk and also just please start to ignore the onslaught of propaganda coming out of the US and Western media and establishment.
Where would you recommend for people that want to further inform themselves? Where would you recommend they get news on China? Because it is not easy. Okay, here in the U.S., you either have people ignoring it or you have active propaganda against it.
Right. No, it's totally true. Well, it is not easy to get good information on China because unfortunately, a lot of even the left and the left media and the left infrastructure has long kind of aligned themselves with this humanitarian interventionist political line of the United States. And so it's, for me, the best information I think always goes to the source. And while, for example, CGTN, right, China Global Television Network, they will host people from outside of China, like a Max Blumenthal,
Mhm.
where someone like him would not even be paid attention to by the corporate media, right? He's not going to be on CNN or MSNBC. It's almost similar to RT in that sense, and that is a wealth of knowledge and is actually geared towards trying to understand China. Of course, it is, media directly emanating out of China. So if there is suspicions about it, then vet the information, and do your best to do that. But I think that there is this hypocrisy about, this idea of China's media apparatus being inherently biased towards misinforming people outside of China, because there is this projection that happens all the time of, okay, the US media is always lying to me, the UK press is always lying to me, BBC, CNN, they're always lying to me. So CGTN must always be lying to me. But take it from someone who's been there. A lot of things that CGTN says, you can verify just by walking the streets of China.
Right.
You can
Right.
verify the poverty alleviation. You can verify political changes that happen in China. You can verify what government officials are saying with what is being done in China. It's not incredibly difficult work, but I think
Yeah.
the work is understanding and building that mutual understanding, so we're not repeating the mistakes of Assyria, of a Libya,
Yeah.
of Iraq, right?
It's similar to RT. People love to just say, "Oh, well, Russia wants this," and everything on RT says that. And it's like, well, no one tells me what to say, and I write my own stuff. And the shows on RT America are and RT in general, but RT America are very different. You have right wingers, you have left wingers, so you should analyze the content and analyze the person and figure out where they're coming from and where they're getting their information. And I do my best also to show all the people where I'm getting my information, but people just want to write it all off because it's just a brand name or something.
Exactly, and the corporations, right? These social media corporations, they're actively pursuing this campaign of demonizing international media as a proxy for really demonizing all independent media. We've seen it on Twitter with the state-affiliated media organization that RT gets, CGTN gets, even Soapbox by Rania Halleck gets, right? this campaign and onslaught of a new Cold War variety, which
Yeah.
makes us, question our own capacities to be able to understand and vet and analyze information that we're getting from all sources in order to come to some sort of understanding of the truth. And the fact of the matter is that the biggest, I think, focus that people need in the United States and the West to start to look at is, what is this new Cold War? And I'm a part of the the No Cold War campaign, and we are constantly trying to find ways to not uh, demonize and just have this extreme skepticism of a country we don't understand, but to try to build relationships, right?
Right.
Try to build a campaign that's against first the source of the aggression and the source of the problem. That's really what the best adversarial journalism, activist journalism as a whole should be about. It should be about what is the source of the problem that we are investigating. And I think, in the United States, we're sitting in the source of the problem. We have to always begin from there. So the best way to find out more about China is to start to unravel these narratives, in order to come to a more balanced understanding. Because at the end of the day, we should not, and we should not, but we do not dictate the affairs of China and the 25% of the population that live there,
Well,
and
and
we shouldn't be looking for that.
yeah. And I know, and you mentioning the 25% of the population made me remember the fact that we have 5% or 4% of the population and 25% of the world's prisoners. So we've got this crime against humanity prison state going on in the U.S., and we're pointing at other countries and going, what they're doing is a crime against humanity. It's pretty hilarious. But yeah, what you were saying about cooperation, I mean, we're at the edge of the cliff. We're on the cusp of extinction in so many ways. And, do you think we're going to solve it by creating cold or hot wars with other countries, bombing them, alienating them, fighting against them? It's the only way we're getting through this is through mass cooperation. So at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. Before I let you go, what else have you been working on recently, or been talking about with Margaret Kimberly, who's also incredible on your podcast?
Yeah. Well, we've been trying to do monthly live streams. I also try to do monthly streams called the Internationalist Transmission, where I have folks who are involved in anti-war, anti-imperialism work to talk about certain questions like this. But I'm trying to also focus outside of the realm of China. Last time I had a guest, Philemon Zarai, who spoke about Ethiopia and Eritrea and what's happening there, because that's been in the news over the last several months. I'm hoping to do some coverage about what's going on in Latin America.
Give us the elevator pitch. What's happening in Ethiopia?
Well, it's a very complicated situation.
No, you get one sentence. That's it.
But I think the interesting thing is that there is this kind of similar human rights line being thrusted upon a very complex conflict, and it's happened with a new kind of government change in Ethiopia with Ahmed Abiy, who is the prime minister there. But the U.S., isn't so happy with the Ethiopia-Eritrea peace deal. There's been a long-standing relationship with the TPLF from the West. And so there is, I think, kind of these divisions being sowed within that country in order to keep it unstable. And China is a big part of it too, because China has invested with Ethiopia, especially over the last decade or so, to a large degree. And, that kind of ethnic tension being stoked, I think is part and parcel of how to, prevent that country from being, independent. So it's very complex, but, we're doing work around, we had Cornell West on recently to talk about the Black radical tradition, because it is Black History Month. And we're going to continue to do this kind of work to educate people about, we just had the Judas and the Black Messiah movie come out, and there
Oh
was a
yeah,
lot of love for that.
let me get your take on that. I talked about it with Graham Elwood on our podcast, and I think that my take is that it did some justice for Fred Hampton as a human being, and it did do a not bad job of making the cops and the FBI look like assholes who assassinated him. However, what I feel it didn't do at all was make the Black Panthers look like anything other than just kind of a terrorist organization. There's like 2 sentences about how they feed some children, but other than that, it just looked like guys with guns running around.
Yes, yes, and my perspective on it, and I wrote about it, is that this is a common thing that happens, and I think that the fact that this movie was so well done, and I think is really the first kind of um, account outside of a documentary, although I could argue that it's the first just account in general out in the mainstream,
Yeah.
which has attempted to humanize the players in the Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton, etc. However, given that it was Hollywood, there was a cost to this humanization in the sense that there were obvious decisions made about what to focus on. So, for example, the humanization of William O'Neill versus the fact that the Black Panther Party in it still comes off as essentially an apolitical cop killing organization, right? There were multiple scenes of Black Panthers killing police officers, and one of them, which I talk about, was an account that was completely distorted from how the Black Panther Party reported on it. And it's just important, I think, out of this that while many do believe that people will take this movie and start educating themselves about Fred Hampton, etc., that the intentional portrayal of the Black Panther Party as an apolitical cop killing organization is part and parcel of a long-standing problem. And you've talked about this in recent streams I've seen with Graham Elwood about, we're talking about U.S. intelligence and abroad and messing with China, but right here in the United States, these organizations, foundations, etc., they are operating in a similar manner to ensure that we can't learn from Fred Hampton, we can't learn from the Black Panther Party, and that a movie that claims to be humanizing this story decides to erase internationalism, erase socialism, really not focus on the activities. Fred Hampton, yeah, he was a human being, but he wasn't a human being that seemed like he was, what was he, 18, 19, 20-year-old leader of one of the fastest growing political organizations in the United States at the time, who was being targeted and being, to the point of assassination. But I didn't get that feeling. And I think it does an injustice to the Black Panther Party. And I think for many of those who still remain in prison because of their activities in the Black Panther Party, for those who I've listened to, like Elaine Brown, Daruba Ben Wahad, who continue to say this is not the way the story should be told, I think we still need to amplify that and make sure that even if this movie is good, we're still holding it under a microscope for the damage it could cause.
And if you did a search of that script, I feel strongly the number one most used word in that script is pigs. Pigs is said in every single scene, which I'm not saying they didn't call cops pigs, but it was very clear which scenes they wanted to highlight in that film. Despite making Fred Hampton seem like a caring guy and a caring father and things like that, it made the Black Panthers out to be basically just a cop killing organization.
Yeah, and there were 2 separate scenes. I mean, the scene with the police patrol, it was very subtle. It was right before the assassination scene where Fred Hampton says, "Be careful when you're patrolling the pigs." And then you have a scene of a member of the organization patrolling and then ending up killing police officers before he's killed himself. And that is the narrative that the U.S. intelligence services, the FBI in particular, has spread about the Black Panther Party since COINTELPRO, but even into the current period, where how many times have we heard that the Black Panther Party and the Ku Klux Klan are the same? that directly comes from this legacy. And when we see scenes like that, and we don't see how the hard work that it takes to learn the law. And I cited a few speeches of Fred Hampton where he talks about how the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party patrolled the police, because it was different in Oakland where they could open carry, right?
Yeah.
I think you could only carry concealed in Illinois at the time. So how they patrolled the police differently than the Oakland chapter, but he goes into detail, right? So we didn't get that. We didn't get to how this was done and how much work it takes for really kids, right? I mean, I'm 30 years old now. They were 18, 19, some were 16, 17.
Yeah.
Trying to organize not just this, but the free breakfast program, and being the leader of the anti-war movement at the time, which the Black Panther Party was, right? None of that was discussed. Even the scene of the Rainbow Coalition, that was largely apolitical in a sense, other than some, oh, you're going through what we're going through too. We didn't get the sense that, okay, what is this solidarity really all about? And I think that's an intentional decision about selling a movie, as well as what, obviously what Hollywood will allow, given that Fred Hampton is one of the what was and still is one of the most despised revolutionaries in U.S. history by the government.
Yeah. I think that's very true. Danny, I can't thank you enough for being here. I know a lot of people in the comment thread want to know where they can follow your work.
Sure. So definitely check me out each week at blackagendareport.com. I am doing some, other work. I'm also working part-time with Press TV, We the People program. But definitely, if you can, sign up for my Patreon, because I'm trying to do more freelance work. I'm trying to build up to be able to travel more. So in an economic depression, as you said earlier, we all need to rely on the people for that. So patreon.com/Danny Haiphong is where I'm keeping all of my work right now, and doing some exclusive stuff for people, so I can build up to be able to do some more of that traveling that needs to happen to understand what's going on in China, what's going on in Vietnam. These are things that are really on my mind right now during COVID-19. What am I saying, after?
Let's hope there's an after. Thank you so much, Danny. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lee. Appreciate it.
Keep fighting. That was Danny Haiphong. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Hope you got something out of it. Just some great points in there about where we get our information. Some great points about how these accusations of human rights coming from our government are always and inevitably used to create the grounds for economic war, for actual bombing. You see it again and again with Libya, with Iraq, with Syria, and Afghanistan. This isn't to say that there aren't people suffering around the world, and I think that we should all stand up for that kind of thing. But when you see news reports, going against a country, never talking about anything positive that's going on in that country, and just hammering away with completely false claims, many of them that we can point to and say, hey, look at this, it's completely fucking false, and it's coming from one guy who completely changed the statistics or the numbers within the source data. That's the kind of thing you got to look out for. And it's sad that even democracy now is falling for this garbage. Another article by the Gray Zone this week, which I mentioned yesterday, revealed that Reuters and BBC, BBC is not surprising, but Reuters, BBC, and Bellingcat leaked documents show they are in contract with the Foreign Office to create propaganda against Russia. So not really surprising, but when you see the proof, it is a different thing. So just to reiterate, all the donations from this super chat and upcoming super chats are going to people in need, coming from you guys, basically. For those of you who are having a lot of trouble, where $50 or $100 could make a big difference, then please do email Common Censored. That's the name of my podcast with Eleanor Goldfield. Common Censored at protonmail.com. And then we'll be choosing however many people as we can. Depends on the number of donations. But we'll be choosing at random to send that money out and help people out. Kind of like a mutual aid within our little moment of clarity / Common Censored community. So that's the goal, and we'll see how it goes. You can also, if you're watching this later and not part of the super chat, you can also donate by sending it to Venmo at Lee Camp, spelled the normal way, LEECAMP, my normal way at least. But you can Venmo there and just put a note in the comment that says donation, and this is the only thing I'm collecting donations for, so we will know what it's for. But anyway, we'll be updating you on all this on the live stream Sunday with Eleanor Goldfield. That is at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're doing it an hour earlier this time, 7 p.m. Eastern. I believe, if the math is hitting me correctly, that's 4 p.m. Pacific. Let's hope it is. Thank you guys for the donations. I really appreciate it. And we'll let you know who is benefiting from all this. We won't give their name unless they want us to, but we'll explain their situation to you and let you know how they benefited. And please take a moment to share this. You can also check out my new column over at Sheer Post. That's SCHEERPOST. It's also up at leecamp.com, so you can read it there. But check it out and keep fighting.